All right. Hello, everyone. I am Nicole White. I am so excited this morning. I have a wonderful, beautiful guest. His name is Kiara Windrider. He is a psychotherapist and also has authored 7 or 8 books now. A wonderful human being. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Kiara. Will you introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you, Nicole. It's just a joy to meet you and listen to you. And, we are in very interesting times right now, and momentous and crazy and, you know, upsetting and joyful and powerful and spiritual and devastating all at the same time.
It's true.
And I think a lot of people recognize that, especially this year, 2020, has been a major test for humanity, for the earth, for our own spiritual balance and integrity, and for how we respond to this crisis that we're going through. As someone said, it's not what you're dealing with, but how you deal with what you face that makes your journey what it is. And I think it's time for us now to step into courage, into integrity, into our power more than ever before. And perspective is important, awareness is important, and just respect and love, holding a big picture perspective which includes all of us, because it's no longer time for division, for combative stances. It's about joining together in the best ways we know how in order to break free as humanity, as a culture, as a planet. So personally, I've been working as a psychotherapist for many years, and it's not something I do actively anymore, simply because I found myself more focused on groups, more focused on writing and teaching and sharing from a number of different perspectives. But that background has been important, that, ability to see the mirror of ourselves in everything we see around us. So, it's so important to understand places where we tend to project on each other or deny the truth of something and then go into a head in the sand syndrome. So it's like to see the truth and to live our truth in the best way we can, spiritually, politically, ecologically. All these things are so important. What we put into our bodies, um, what we release through our interaction with each other. So I know you have a lot of insights and questions about all of this. So let's see where we go. And I feel like it's such an important time for all of us right now. And I chose this beautiful image of a lion today because I feel like this is the power, the strength, and the courage that we are looking for in this age.
Yes.
And we all need this. We all need this desperately sometimes.
Yes. Yes. So how do we open the door to, most of us has spent a lot of this year just like, oh my gosh, okay, what's next, and in the US and the state that I'm in right now, they're locked down again, Christmas, holidays, it seems like they're trying to just shut it all down. How do we take this time and see it as a gift? I mean, I know some of the things that I've done, but from your perspective, how do we help people see this time as a gift, as well as get out of the duality of what we're being shown?
Yeah, I mean that's the most important question. To look for the gift within the challenge, and I think it helps me to see the big picture perspective, the long-term perspective, to know that this is not just something that happened spontaneously this year. It's something that's been planned for a long time. And there's an agenda behind this, which is important to understand if we are to actually do something about it. So,
Mhm.
there's many interlocking agendas, as you know. So the lockdowns, the vaccines, you know, the the totalitarian mind control, um, Orwellian agendas, which have been in the making for decades, if not millennia.
Mhm.
So just to know that this is what's going on, and also to know at the same time that humans, as spirit, as spiritual beings, are so much more than any of this. So, it's very easy for us to fall into despair, into hopelessness, into fear, and to feel like there's no way that we have the ability or the power or the cohesion to be able to stand up against this. It's too big, it's too organized. And that's absolutely not true.
Mhm.
People are waking up in ways never before.
Mhm.
And even though it seems like an enormous challenge, even though the lockdowns and everything was related to that seem like such a basic um, abuse of fundamental human rights, there's something happening underneath all of this, which is really powerful. And it's like, many of us have been sitting on the fence for a long time, not really caring and not really choosing to make a difference in this world. And now we don't have a choice anymore, or
Mhm.
those choices are being taken away one step at a time.
Mhm. Mhm.
David Icke talks about the totalitarian tiptoe,
Mhm.
where it's like, nothing happens all at once because then we see right through it. It's like the story of that frog. You put this frog in a boiling pan of water and you heat it up really slowly, and it'll choose to boil itself to death before jumping out,
Right.
which is what we do.
Right.
If we were suddenly to put inside a pot of boiling water, immediately we would jump out because we know what we're facing. But
Mhm.
because this is happening so slowly, it's like we get used to something, and then the next step, and the next step, and the next step,
Mhm.
until we find that, we don't have the ability to make a choice anymore.
Right.
Or we've made a choice, and it's
Right.
not necessarily something that's good for us.
Right.
So I think when you ask for the gift in all this, the most important gift is that, yes, we are waking up. We are recognizing that we can no longer sit on the fences. We're being faced with challenges that we have to confront for our own survival and the survival of our children, the survival of our planet. And if we care enough and dare enough, then this is the time to make a difference.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are new to all this and have no idea what we're talking about, Kiara's website is a wealth of information. He's a I mean, just it seems like writing is as natural as breathing for you. The beautiful amount of writing that you do, and again, he's written many books, and he has so much information. So, if this is new for you, just kind of feel into that, and again, open your mind to some possibilities that are maybe different than um, what our news and stuff like that tells us. Uh, but mostly what we're doing here is it's also a time really to go within, I believe, and to stop listening to so much news. I know a lot of folks that I work with, they turn on the news first thing in the morning, emails about it throughout the day, checking the stats. I really feel that it's torture, watching these numbers come in and day out. And we've never had anything like this so consistently. Um, I like to share with people how I bookend my day, where in the morning, my phone is nowhere near me. I wake up, I like to hit the snooze, get into bed with my dog, think about what I want to feel for the day. At the end of the day, I kind of do more of my creative process.
Mm.
What kind of solutions or help would you help people with? Because I really think the news is an addiction. We think we need to listen to it all the time. What recommendations would you have for people to, one, start to recognize that it is an addiction to the news, no matter what it's talking about, no matter which side people are on? But how do we break that, and why is it so important to break that?
Yeah, good question. We do have a need to understand. The more chaos there is, the more we need to um, get past the the chaos itself into a big picture perspective. And I think this is where it becomes tricky because it's not the quantity of news that's going to get us through all this. It's not looking at this and that and the other and trying to figure it out from the rational level of the mind. Because it's not about the rational level of the mind. We need to get past that layer of identity, that that illusion of what's real.
Mm,
So there's many different um, avenues where we get our news from, and of course, forget the mainstream media completely because that's not where you're going to find truth. In fact, that's going to be the opposite. But even within the alternative media, discernment is so important.
yeah,
And the question for me is, how do you develop discernment? What do you look for?
yeah,
Um, and this is where a spiritual journey comes in also. Because even within the spiritual community, there's often a lack of discernment. Sometimes, there's so much, what's the word for it? Woo-woo, wishy-washy kind of, you know, um, undiscerning um, trash
yeah,
that you find,
yeah,
which is no better or worse than anything else. So how do you look for what's real? How do you um, train yourself to move to levels of the mind beyond the rational, where you can access information directly from source, directly from soul, to see the big picture perspective and to feel empowered.
mm-hmm,
So true information will always make you feel empowered,
mm-hmm,
whereas false information always has a tendency to make us feel hopeless and despairing.
right.
And
And
so
why?
it's not true and false in terms of what may be factually true, but what it does to our soul. It may be factually true, but still lead us to despair,
Mm-hmm,
which doesn't do much good,
mm-hmm,
at least in the beginning.
mm-hmm,
Ultimately, it's about being able to see the big picture and to hold all sides of it, um, and then to um, integrate it all completely.
yeah,
So whether it's spiritual truth, political truth, environmental truth, inner truth, it doesn't matter because there's a discernment, there's a quality of discernment that becomes possible as we listen to what's around us. And what what's most important for us to get now is that we are going through an initiation on this planet.
mm.
And an
So,
initiation doesn't always look and isn't always easy.
right.
But it's what forces us to grow. It's what forces us to go beyond our limited awareness as humans, as divine humans.
Right.
It forces us to evolve as a species. It forces us to grow and into the next level of humanity,
Mm-hmm,
into the next cultural, political, and um, environmental stance
mm-hmm,
of what we're here to create together.
mm-hmm,
We have come so close to destroying the earth. If we continue the way we're going, it won't take very long. And then it doesn't matter whether we go in a, in a bang or a whimper.
Mm.
What matters is that we take responsibility for our lives now,
Right.
to understand why we're here, to band together in a way that we can support each other in this journey.
Mm-hmm.
What I see, Nicole, so often is that we've divided ourselves up into left and right, and liberal and conservative, and Democrat and Republican, all these divisions,
Mm-hmm.
which which are no longer serving us, because the true enemy is not the other side. It's a system that's kept us imprisoned in darkness and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And this system runs across all political parties, it runs across banking systems, it runs across the military industrial complex, it runs across every single nation on this earth.
Right.
And
And it
that's the
is worldwide.
system.
Yeah.
It's worldwide. It includes the health concerns. It includes what we're told about our bodies and our um, and what we need to put into our bodies. Um, the foods that we eat, the GMOs that we are forced to ingest. Um, there's certain words that we can't even mention
Yeah.
without being offline.
Yeah.
So there's so much censorship, there's so much fear,
Yeah.
and we need to look at how we can get past all this and really come into balance
So
for ourselves for the earth.
how do we start kind of on a day-to-day basis? Um, most of the clients that I'm working with, most of them now are working from home, but still the 9 to 5.
Mhm.
Most of them very stressed out, sometimes limited resources as to healthy foods that are within their budgets and things like that. And again, this constant bombardment of the news. And a lot of people, I don't want to get too controversial. And, again, people do the research for yourself and see what it feels like. But a lot of the mainstream news, I mean, they literally have a slogan: if it leads, it bleeds. If it bleeds, it leads, right? And so I think a lot of them, doesn't matter what side it's on, it's just fear based.
Mhm.
So what's the start? um like when I work with folks, I think what we start with in the day, right? So if it's food wise, I'm like, just start with breakfast. Start with getting a few good things in for breakfast, some purified water. What can we do for our mind to start our day? I mean, my thing that I like to share with people is, don't turn on the news first thing in the morning. Allow yourself to be yourself, wake up, have your own thoughts, set your
Mhm.
own intentions. What do you think?
Wow, these are the most important questions right now. Yes, I totally agree about the news. Sometimes people are so addicted just to noise, just to having the television blaring something in the background. Whether you're listening or not isn't important.
What is that?
Um,
Why are we so addicted to just constantly
yeah.
having this noise on instead of being able to be in our homes and have it be
Well, that
quiet?
noise actually tends to create an addiction for the rational mind to lock itself into. So if you're talking about listening, discerning, if you're talking about being able to pay attention to our own soul, to the still voice within, we
Mm,
need silence, we need nature, we need to be in right relationship with the body, with the nervous system, with the foods we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, the clarity of our thoughts. So all these things takes discipline,
mhm.
and when we are stuck in a mindless ritual, it's not very easy to learn to create new pathways for the nervous system.
Right. So let's talk, how can we share with folks that transition between, if they did turn off the news, feeling
Mhm.
that discomfort in the body of like, because I think no matter what you listen to, it could be, good spiritual stuff. It could be the fear mongering news. It could be reality TV shows. But like you were saying, if we constantly have noise in our head coming at us, our phones, our computers, our TVs, the radios, we don't have time to really think our own thoughts. And I think sometimes we don't want to think our own thoughts.
Mhm.
Like we want that distraction because there's a lot of negativity or fear. How do we become okay with getting to know ourselves again, stepping into some of that stillness?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think a meditation practice is important. Um, whatever that might be, whether it's a breathing practice, whether it's a movement or dance practice, whether it's vipassana, where you're simply listening to the movement within the body, um, whether it's listening to music that's meaningful and calming, whether it's creating your own music, whether it's being in nature, whether it's, just listening to the elements, whether it's communicating with natural spirits. And people can learn to do that. You can learn to develop relationships with elemental beings, with nature spirits, with angelic beings, with fairies and elves and wood spirits. These are all around us. There's an aspect of ourself which is elemental. And we can learn to pay attention to that and develop a relationship with that. And all of this takes us into a different level of the mind
Mm-hmm.
and a different place within the body,
Mm-hmm.
where we're no longer addicted to the noise of the world around us, and we're no longer addicted to the um, ideas that we've taken for granted about the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just external noise, it's belief systems that are noisy. It's the belief
Yes.
systems that we don't question, that we take in without any kind of filter, which then create separation within ourselves.
Right.
And much of these belief systems are designed to divide and separate. So political belief systems, um, cultural, educational belief systems, whatever they may be, spiritual belief systems even.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes our spiritual beliefs are more um, divisive than even political beliefs,
Right.
because then we kind of tend to um, evaluate each other or judge ourselves based on spiritual ideas, which can be just as easily distorted.
Right.
So listening to the silence, having your own meditation practice, learning to be discerning, all this helps us to get past the belief systems of the mind,
Mm-hmm.
any kind of belief system,
Mm-hmm.
so we can learn to discern for truth directly.
Yeah.
So that quality, that ability to discern for truth directly is so important in these times.
Yeah. So how do you go into your body and decipher? I mean, I know you've been doing it for a long time, but how do we kind of break it down for like beginner's mind, as far as how do we start
Mm.
taking in that information, go into our bodies and ask ourselves, is this true? Does this, like, how do you do it for you? Like, how did you get to a point
Mm.
where you're like, let me dig deeper and make sure that's true, versus, oh yes, this feels true for me. This feels right. What's your
Yeah, yeah.
process?
Well, it's about vibrational resonance, a vibrational frequency. And when we are stuck in a lower vibrational frequency, whether through our diet, whether through our thought forms and belief systems, whether through toxic emotions, whether through fear, then it makes it more difficult to climb out of that. Once we begin climbing out of this, it becomes easier and easier. But the first step of trying to climb out is always going to be the hardest. And this is where we need discipline. First of all, what discipline means recognizing that um, if we keep going the way we're going, nothing's going to change. And if we truly want to change something, we have to make a commitment to that.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that commitment look like? And if it's a strong enough commitment, then we do everything we need to do, everything we can do. Um, and it's a multifaceted approach. So if people are used to junk foods, that lowers our vibrational frequency. If people are
Talk about that more.
drinking,
Talk
um,
about the
mhm,
effects of the GMO foods, alcohol, drugs,
mhm,
on the mind, and you
right,
know.
right. Well, everything, the endocrine system is so connected with the chakra system, which is so connected with the nervous system, which is so connected with the circulatory and um, all the systems of the body. We cannot look at one system in exclusion to another system. So if we are, you know, eating junk foods, how does that affect our endocrine system? How does that affect our relationship with endorphins in the body, dopamine, serotonin, the happiness hormones? We tend to get into this addictive cycle where we see the world in terms of um, illusion and delusion, fear and pain. Um, so just something simple like eating fresh, healthy vegetables that's organic. Okay, it costs a little bit more at first, but then you notice the difference that it makes in your vibrational frequency, in your peace of mind, in your relationship with yourself or with other people, with nature, your ability to listen to voices of silence within you and around you. Um, and then you find you don't need to eat so much
Mhm.
because your body is receiving nourishment from what it is eating. And so then, you start reversing the cycle of obesity, the cycle of diabetes, the cycle of um, illness that we have inherited um, from whatever, the system itself. Um, and I'm finding for myself that there comes a time when the body doesn't need even so much food. It can nourish itself directly on light. It can nourish itself on sunlight. It can nourish itself on prana, just like a plant does. Our bodies are designed for it. It takes time to accomplish that because we're shifting vibrational frequency. But once you begin to approach that, there's so much more joy, and that joy then becomes a path.
Mhm.
So someone like Joseph Campbell talks about following the path of your bliss,
Follow your
or
bliss.
Carlos Castaneda talks about following the path with heart. What does that mean? It's a frequency, it's a discernment, it's a vibrational attunement, um, and it's the voice of your soul. It's an ability to listen. So all these things, it starts with a commitment. Is this worth it for me? Is it worth it for me to be able to listen to the voice of my soul, to be able to listen to aspects of the mind that take me beyond illusion and fear?
Mhm.
Um, can I deal with the challenges of these times in a way that I don't have to go into despair?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's so many people going into so much despair right now, suicide and suicidal tendencies at least.
Yeah.
And
Let's talk
it's,
about that. I haven't shared this openly, but there March
mm,
and April,
mm,
hard for me to admit, but I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna stay on this planet. And some of the darkest days.
mm,
Now most days I'm actually pretty happy. I worked through it. I mean, sometimes
mm,
it was like, okay, because I have a dog and a cat. Okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up, I'm going to feed the dog and cat. I mean, and it came down to those basics. So please do talk about that for folks who may or may not admit it, but they're
Mhm.
really on this brink of, I don't want to be in this world anymore. It's too scary. It's too dangerous. I have no control over my life anymore.
Yeah,
Please talk to that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are social animals. We are designed to love each other, touch, connect. This whole thing with the, the thing that you strap over your face and the 6 feet apart rule and, all these stupid things. It's not designed for humans to be humans.
Right.
And so naturally, it's going to put us into deprivation, sensory deprivation, oxytocin deprivation, and all these things which are designed to separate and create fear.
Yeah.
Um, and no wonder, people are experiencing despair, suicidal tendencies, because this is not what we're designed for. We have to choose at some point that this doesn't work, collectively and socially.
Mm-hmm.
And we have choices. We don't have to be governed by external authority when it comes to choices that are not good for us. Good for us, good for the earth, good for humanity, good for society. We have to choose together to make choices which we can live by.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes courage. It takes courage at first. It
Mm-hmm.
takes togetherness. It takes saying no. It takes saying enough.
Yeah.
Um, it takes recognizing your self-worth, your human value,
Mm-hmm.
and your spiritual
Mm-hmm.
integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also recognition that if I'm not free, why am I here?
Yeah.
If I cannot be real, what's the point of living second-rate lives?
Yeah.
And when that commitment to self is strong enough, then the support comes from within and from without. We find each other, we encourage each other, we empower each other and ourselves. So the same people that started off feeling really hopeless and despairing at the beginning of this year, many of them are finding their true strength
Mm-hmm.
in spite of everything else. They're finding their uh, their truth, their value, their spiritual focus, um, their power.
Right.
They're finding that this is the time that we've been waiting for a very long time,
Mm-hmm.
um, eons.
Mm-hmm.
That this time in human history is a time of great initiation. And we've chosen to come here from across the galaxies to participate in this initiation. And we are right here, in the front rows of history.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's a powerful place to be. It's a beautiful place to be.
Yeah.
We just have to understand what's happening and why. And we have to make choices to step forward in our own beauty, in our own truth.
Yeah.
And once we make that decision and it's clear and strong, then nothing can change that. Nothing can reverse that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we talk about the metamorphosis of a caterpillar as it moves towards the butterfly. Once it gets past a certain point, it can never go back to
Right.
becoming a caterpillar.
Right.
And we are finding that point in ourselves now as a species,
Right.
and of course also as individuals.
Right. And so perhaps the suicidal thoughts that come up for folks, or the hopelessness, is really that middle stage of the metamorphosis where the caterpillar is like, I don't know what's happening to
Mm.
me,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, I'm
right,
dying.
right, right. Yeah, the death of a caterpillar is the birth of a butterfly.
Right.
There's a phrase that's often used, the dark night of the soul, and it's a very apt phrase because when you're going through it, it feels like There's no way out.
Yes.
But it's also the most critical point. So, when the caterpillar starts going inside the cocoon, it's a dark night of the soul.
Yes.
It's a transformational process. And once it understands that, once it sees the big picture, then there's hope.
Yeah.
Then it's no longer about death, suffering, and fear. And once we can walk through the dark night of the soul consciously
Mm-hmm.
and understand the steps that it takes to get through it,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
So, what that means is, okay, one thing is no matter what you're feeling, recognizing that the feeling is not who you are,
Right.
the emotions is not who you are, the thoughts is not who you are. This is simply, it's a way of understanding yourself, but it's not yourself.
Mm.
And as we get in touch with ourselves, it doesn't matter what we feel, what we think.
Mm.
Um, you begin to become a witness for all of that in a way that no matter what you're feeling, no matter what you're thinking, no matter what you're going through externally, you know who you are as a spiritual being, as a conscious entity on this earth, as someone who's come in to make a difference in this world.
Yeah.
And and that gives us a sense of purpose and meaning that nothing can take away.
Mm-hmm.
That's to me the key to walking through the dark night of the soul,
Mm-hmm.
finding a sense of purpose and true meaning on this earth.
Right. Which can be challenging when everything changes so quickly and
Mm,
people are on their own, or even people who are in a bad relationship or a chaotic
mm,
household. um,
right.
there's a varieties of ways for things to just drive you nuts during this time, but to come in and learn to be able to feel your feelings and
Mm,
be okay with them without it like, oh, I've got pain, let me take an aspirin, or to where there's not all this external, let me just try to fix it, but to actually be able to go in and feel it
mm,
and see
right.
what comes.
Yeah, so even if it means taking 30 minutes a day to do what's meaningful, what um, gives you a sense of heartfulness. So whether it's meditating, whether it's inspirational reading, um, whether it's turning on some music and dancing to it,
Mm,
whether it's just being out completely on your own in nature, whether it's taking a long shower where you can just reflect and be by yourself. Just simple things. Um, but something where you can turn off the noise within your head. And it's just a training process.
yeah.
Even if you're reading something inspirational, it's a training process. You're not reading from the level of the mind where you think you understand something. You're you're reading from a place within your heart where you're feeling, receiving, and transforming.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quality of heart which we can train ourselves to feel and to understand. Um, but it does take some initial training.
Mm-hmm.
And once we understand, once we connect with the heart in the way that we as humans are designed for, then there's an empowerment and there's a strength, there's a courage that takes over.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can walk through the dark night of the soul. Then we find our heart and our truth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then we can support each other, inspire each other, take decisions together, which are meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some people may not have heard of this dark night of the soul before.
Mm.
and I think it's a process we go through in many different times throughout our life sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And but whether or not you know a lot about it, I mean, it very much I mean, we are definitely going through that as a country, as a world, as a
Mm.
species. For us here, I think I get a little, again, I don't watch the mainstream news, but what I know about it is we're just seeing the numbers of the one particular thing that's going on right now. But it may seem weird, but I keep thinking, well, how many deaths are there from the suicides? How many? We know that alcohol and drug use is out the window. We know that domestic abuse is out the window. And why aren't we hearing about these things in order to balance out what's going on? And I know a lot of this goes back to, and this may be the first time you're hearing this, that the story that we're being fed by the news is not necessarily what exactly is going on. And we're being fed a lot of fear. And so again, it's like those numbers that come up, we're all afraid of basically death, right? I mean, that's what's keeping us all indoors and protecting the elderly and the immune compromised, because
Mm.
it's this fear of this impending death if we get it. Meanwhile, they're not talking about the thousands, if not millions, of people who may have tested positive but are fine, right? No symptoms or very little symptoms, a little cold, a little flu. That aside, the fear mongering that we're going through, I think, also really rips us apart from who we are and keeps us glued. So like Kiara was saying, we need, like, the art time is that for me, and I don't do it enough, but getting out into nature, right? No outside noise coming in, but just this movement, feeling my feet, feeling my body move through, nature. And if you're in a big city, even just to walk on the sidewalk without, sometimes even without music or without noise, right? To where you can just be with yourself
Mm. Being creative in any way
and create.
that's, you know, art,
Yeah,
painting,
yeah,
writing,
yeah.
creative thinking. Um, Let me speak about this also from an astrological perspective.
Please, yeah.
So, we are the US right now is going through its Pluto return. And what does that mean? So, Pluto makes a 245-year cycle in its tropical movement around the sun. And the US as a nation um, was actually founded in 1776, right? So with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and everything else. So if you add 245 years to 1776, you come to 2021, precisely February 19th. So we are going through a complete cycle of Pluto relative to the US birth chart. And what does that mean? Pluto is the smallest of the planets. It represents the journey of the soul. It's invisible, it's microscopic, but it has um, more of an influence on the way we function than any other planet.
Mm.
So it represents the journey of the soul. It's the death and the rebirth, the transformational process. It's the karmic cycles. It's the breaking down of whatever has not worked in the past. Whether it's karmic um, cycles of enslavement or genocide, or whether it has to do with aspects of ourselves that have been hidden from ourselves, which are now being revealed. Anything that needs to be seen for what it is, that has been repressed, is going to show up at this time. So, underneath all of these challenges that we're facing right now, whether it's political, whether it's health, whether it's whatever it is, We are looking at things that have been suppressed and hidden for a very long time. And as we all know, the US represents, on a certain level, the entire planet.
Mm.
You know, people from around the world have found their home
Mm.
within that particular culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and politically, socially, in many ways, it actually represents the whole planet. So what's going on astrologically as far as the Pluto return for the US chart also affects the whole planet.
Mm.
We're going through a collective initiation on a planetary level as never before. Pluto was only discovered in the 1800s, so this is the first time since its discovery that any nation, and especially the United States, has had the opportunity to go through this cycle of rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
Rebirth means that if you're conscious, there's a resurrection. That's the phoenix rising from the ashes.
Mm.
If you're unconscious, it's a collapse. It's a breakdown. It's destruction.
Mm.
And so this is a choice point for all of us, as a nation, as a collective, and in our own personal lives. Are we going to ride through this choice point consciously or unconsciously?
Mm.
And each of us can make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Each of us is responsible to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And together, collectively, we make a decision that affects all of us. And my own sense of this, just like Charles Dickens talks about in The Tale of Two Cities, these are the best of times, these are the worst of times, all the extremes possible in between.
That's the
Um,
truth.
and it's all a choice that we're making.
Mm-hmm.
So if we choose, this can be the most amazing times ever in human and planetary history.
Mm.
Um, that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm experiencing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we're always going to be in that space of, bliss and balance. There are times we're going to go through the dark nights, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to learn how to navigate through them so that it doesn't pull us down. We
Right.
need to learn to connect with the soul in a way that we can access that awareness, um, that's discernment, that sense of self when we need it, which
Mm-hmm.
is more and more often these days.
Yeah.
And so this can be a time of great evolutionary awakening for all of us as a planetary species. There's new species coming into form right now, which we've never experienced before. Look at the new children that are being born, the gifts they're coming in with, the potentials that they carry, their perspective on reality. It's very different from what we as adults have had to go through in our lifetimes. It's all part of the awakening. It's all part of the evolutionary um, breakthrough
Mm-hmm.
that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it's happening, despite ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's what an initiation is really about.
Yeah.
It takes us out of the belief systems of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It forces us to connect with the hearts and with the soul in a way that puts us in touch with the truth of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And this is happening whether or not we know it or not, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's happening everywhere.
Yeah. Let's talk about the soul a little. And again, for folks, if this is new information, just kind of almost see it as a sci-fi movie that you're letting in, and you're just kind of, like Avatar or something. You're just letting in this information, see what feels true for you, and if it doesn't, that's okay too. But we're just kind of opening up to listening, right? To listening to these different perspectives. So my question for you, Kiara, is talk a bit about your belief of our soul. um, because the more I go along, I no longer believe it's just like birth, go through the life, the
Right.
body dies, and then boom, that's it.
Right.
I know different people have different beliefs, and different religions have different beliefs. And again, what Kiara is going to say does not mean that your belief and how you've believed is wrong. It's just a different perspective, and I love what I've heard so far. So if you'd share um, more about your beliefs, your understandings, right, about our
Mhm.
souls.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. I think we are multidimensional beings. We have many different layers of identity. We tend to get fixated on certain levels of identity, which have to do with the mind, which have to do with beliefs, which have to do with our identity as physical bodies. But those are only, a few of the aspects of what we truly are. Um, in many of the Eastern traditions, they talk about different bodies. So we have the physical body, you have the prana body, which is the energy body surrounding the physical body, and then you have the emotional body, the mental body, and the soul body. And all these different bodies are different vibrational frequencies that are locked together through magnetic fields on this earth. So the Earth's magnetic field is responsible for bringing all these different bodies into resonance with each other. Um, so we can train ourselves to shift our identity from um, just the lower bodies to include the soul body.
Mm,
So the soul is actually a vibrational frequency. It's a relatively permanent aspect of who we are. So um, many people talk about having experienced different lifetimes and entering into one particular lifetime, and then exiting, carrying the the gist of what we've experienced in one lifetime back with us as we move past what we call physical death. We carry the memories within the mental and emotional bodies up into the soul body. And then we choose another incarnation to come back and to continue our growth and our purpose. So it's like we are multidimensional beings. There's no death, there's no end. We simply continue in many different ways, in many different lives, um, meeting the same soul families over and over again. So there's no death. And once we recognize there's no death, it also means there's no fear.
mhm,
Because a fear comes from the idea of death, from the idea that we can lose something, lose someone, lose ourselves. And once we not just believe, but actually get to experience who we are on these multidimensional levels, that fear just vanishes.
mm,
In fact, instead of that, it's replaced by this grand sense of confidence and radiant power and um, compassion and beauty and love and wonder. Um, this is what we're here on this earth to incarnate, to experience, to share with each other in the world.
mhm,
And and what's happening now with these initiations that we talked about is that we are coming in contact with the soul. So we are not human beings who have a soul. We are souls who have incarnated into bodies.
mm,
So our essential identity is the soul. Or you could even go further and say, my essential identity is the self, the one self that moves through all things and is beyond all things.
Yeah.
And then that identification, that oneness of consciousness, then enters into different modalities, different dimensions, different bodies, creates for itself an experience in a given incarnation, and then continues to cycle back and forth.
Mhm.
So once we really understand that, then life becomes an adventure.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
And do
and you know, it's something that actually um, isn't a belief system anymore. It's a knowing. It's a
yeah,
recognition that pervades everything
yeah,
that we experience.
yeah. And I believe that like those deja vu moments are kind of like those little, little pokes, like, this isn't your first rodeo.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like you're creating a time loop where you recognize that you're not stuck in the linear version of history.
Yeah, yeah,
You're multidimensional.
yeah. Something that I've heard from a few different spiritual teachers, which rocks my world in some ways, and in other ways, I take it in
Mhm.
like it's water on a dry day. Is that things are not linear. Like
Yeah.
we go through this life, this timeline where it seems it's linear, but it's not, right? And we
Mhm.
can see that sometimes in our thought process. But um, if you would kind of go into that a bit as to, our soul and maybe the different lifetimes that we live, it's not like, oh,
Yeah. So I think that's a good question. Is like, what does linear mean? You know, what does time mean? And time can mean many different things on many different levels. So when we're identified with the rational mind, then time tends to be linear. You know, we remember things in terms of the past. We create expectations of something in the future. And what ends up happening is that our sense of who we are in this present moment becomes minuscule, because most of our identity is in the past or the future. So that's what linear time means. We basically are not really here, we're not present. But then once we become more multidimensional, once we get in touch with the soul, once we get in touch with our true self, then our experience of time actually changes. Um, and many of us have had those moments, maybe occasional glimpses where, the first time you fall in love, the first time you have this great peak experience where everything stops, or you're going through an accident and suddenly it's like time slows down and you're just totally present. And in that presence, you find that you miraculously escape from certain death. All of us have had those experiences where we somehow, for brief moments of time, come out of linear time. And we can learn to make that a normal state of being.
mm,
So, this multidimensionality of time can become just as normal for us as a linear expression of time.
right.
So, when people talk about synchronicity, basically it's about being in the right place at the right time with the right people for the right events. And it's like, the universe is guiding, protecting, holding, supporting each of us in each moment.
Mm-hmm,
It's not up to us individually as separate beings to make things happen.
mm-hmm,
I mean, it's impossible. There's no way that we can do that
mm-hmm,
without stress. But
right.
once we surrender to the synchronicity of life, then things simply happen meaningfully and effortlessly and joyfully. And that's what synchronicity, multidimensional time is about. And we can all learn to live in that place, to live from that place.
Yeah. And 2020 has absolutely been these weird time glitches where
Mm,
at first it's like, oh my gosh, every day is so long. And now all of a sudden, as we're talking here, it's almost mid December. It's
yeah,
crazy. So
yeah,
you said something earlier, because you're currently in India
right,
and you've spent a good time in the US as well
right.
as many parts of the world. You said something that was really interesting. That a lot of the world is focused on the US right now. And that kind of boggles my mind, like why?
Mm,
Why isn't each country just, doing their own thing, or is this turning more into a global
mm, mm.
family?
Well, I think each nation has a destiny, and there's different destinies. Like India has her own destiny, the UK has its own destiny, the US has its own destiny, Malaysia has its own destiny, in the family of nations. But because of the fact that the United States is such a melting pot of cultures, it has a special destiny that has to do with the unity of nations, a unity of all people. And it's an experiment to see how well we can learn to live in unity, in oneness, in, in respect, in harmony, in support. Um, so, like we know, it's very easy to come out of that, to create divisions, just incomprehensible divisions.
That's
There used to be two genders. Now there's who knows how many,
yeah,
75 different genders, whatever that means.
yeah,
And the more we divide ourselves up into artificial divisions, the less we can relate to ourselves as human, and the less
yeah,
we can relate to each other as human.
yeah,
And this is something I feel is the challenge of these times.
yeah.
Um, we can go into political divisions. People identify with a particular political affiliation.
It's
Um,
so intense here. I have
mm,
friends, I have family members, and I am watching people not going to certain businesses because of their certain
mm,
political beliefs. I'm seeing such a divide, and it's so heartbreaking because, and then they want me to pull sides too. It's like, well, which side are you on, Nicole? And I'm like, nope. I'm here in the middle. I'm watching, and I'd really, you know, why is this year so blown up to where last year we could all be friends, we could all hang out, everyone was cool, but now we're not. And without getting into the specifics of it, this duality, it I feel it's doing us so much harm,
mm,
and again, whatever people believe is fine, but this the math, thing, people attacking other people for not, and it becoming almost like a political statement is so heartbreaking to watch.
yes.
I mean, I see it there's like little neighborhood apps where people can talk about what's going on in the neighborhood, and I see people calling people out for this or that. What do you think this is? I feel like it's almost an intentional divide to get people to
Mhm,
fight
mhm.
so that they're not looking at the real thing that's going on. What?
I think you're absolutely right. It is intentional. And the question then becomes who's behind it?
Mm,
And for this, I think we need to go back many, many years, decades, centuries, millennia. Um, the word that's being used today to describe this particular faction is the deep state.
yeah,
Um, so, whatever word we use for it doesn't matter, but basically it's an agenda. and it's an agenda for global totalitarian Orwellian control. Once we see this and can see through it, it's over. But because we cannot see through it is the reason that we get divided. Divided by race, by class, by political affiliation, by all these artificial divisions. But once we begin to see that it's not about us and them or as individuals, it's about this agenda behind all this
Mm-hmm.
that has its own purpose, which is quite diabolical and insidious, but is limited.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very, very few people who have a massive level of control through the media, through the banking systems, and through political structures on the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we're divided between ourselves, there's no way that we can see through what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so important to not get caught up in the petty divisions, in the fear mongering divisions, because then it gives them an excuse to do what their agenda is about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what the human spirit is about. The
Right.
human spirit is about freedom. The human spirit is about harmony. The human spirit is about oneness.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is what the destiny of the United States is truly about.
Mm-hmm.
An experiment in harmony, freedom, justice, and truth.
Yes.
And this is what the Pluto return, is guiding the United States towards. Yes, we're going to go through some difficult times. Yes, we're going to go through a collapse of the old structures.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we're going to come through these times in a way that is beautiful and
So,
amazing.
so this February 19th date that you're talking about is it this deep dark stuff that we're moving through until then, or does that date begin
Mhm.
yet an even bigger
Yeah.
layer?
Well, Pluto is a very slow moving planet, and a Pluto return could take 2, 3, or 4 years to
I
actually
heard
go
that.
through.
Right.
So we've already begun.
Okay.
Everything that happens since the beginning of this year is part of the Pluto return.
Okay.
And the next 2, 3 years will continue.
Okay.
The thing about a Pluto return or any astrological, um, aspect, is that the first time that you experience an energy is always the hardest.
Mm.
Then you get used to it, then you integrate it, then you start to connect with the power of that particular aspect. Um, and
What you
then
said, yeah.
we go through, the rebirth. So
Yeah.
rather than being stuck in the death aspect, you're evolving into the rebirth, the resurrection, the awakening, the phoenix aspect
Yeah. That
of
is
Pluto.
so key what you just said of the first time we experience something, it is the most challenging, right? So
Mm.
maybe for most of us in our life, this is literally the first time we've gone through something like this. So some of us are like, ooh, digging deep, there's got to be something bigger. And other folks are like, okay, this is what I'm told to do, this is what I'll do.
Right.
Go into that a little bit more about how we can feel that discomfort of the something new in our
Mm.
bodies, because this is new for all of us. and
Right.
and and how do we stop the duality? How do we stop making enemies with people we've been friends with or family with for all these years? Because again, this is new and we're triggered. So the one agenda is to get us divided. How do we step above that which is happening to divide us, to think bigger than that, to think clearer than that. Like,
Mm.
wow, these are good people I've been hanging out with all this time,
Yeah.
right? We all have our,
It's such an important question, Nicole. And I think the key is awareness.
mm,
This, okay, so I recognize that in this moment, I'm going into division, I'm going into judgment, I'm going into fear. And in that moment of awareness, I make a choice. Will I continue in this path, or do I choose harmony, integrity, and fearlessness? Am I choosing to connect with the destiny of my soul? And when I'm connected with the soul, there is no other. There's no me, there's no you. So there's no judgment, and there's no projection, and there's no need to um, go into us versus them.
yes,
So so it starts with awareness,
yeah,
and not very many people can remain in that state of awareness at all times. But we can all begin, and then it grows. So the moment we catch ourselves, oh, I'm going into judgment, I'm going into fear, then we make a choice.
yeah, yeah.
It's like, what's that story about the two wolves? I think it's the Hopi story,
Hmm. Hmm.
and basically the response is, okay, the the wolf you feed is the wolf that um,
Rose.
you,
Yeah,
that grows. You
yeah,
feed the fear, you grow the fear. You feed the love, you grow the love.
right. You feed the duality, you are, you are the duality. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely. And that's with the astrology. Um, I've heard of this part that the U.S. is going through before. How do we also take into consideration the that this is native land that the U.S., now known as the U.S., took over to honor, native, as we call Native
Mhm.
American land, and
Right.
Mexico.
Right.
How does that play in? Because we say the U.S. is the infant country,
Mhm.
but it's not.
Right. Well, the U.S. as a nation, we're talking about the Declaration of Independence. This is one subset of that continental history.
Hmm.
Every single native tribe has its own origins, its own history, its own destiny,
Hmm.
which remains. So just because the Sioux Nation is now part of the American nation doesn't mean that it's completely bypassed its own individual destiny.
Right.
And there's certainly been a lot of genocide, there's been a lot of um, enslavement, there's been a lot of evil
Yeah.
within that nation, within the history of that culture.
Hmm.
But that's been true for every nation. You look at any country in Europe, any country in Asia, any country across the world, even looking at Native American tribes within the United States or other cultures, there's been genocide, there's been slavery, there's been all these things that have been part of um, humanity growing up. We
Hmm.
haven't matured yet,
Hmm.
but hopefully now it's like all this with the Pluto return and with the challenges we're facing, with the spiritual initiation we're going through, with all these planets and with all our evolutionary destiny. It's about maturing as the species. We're coming out of our adolescence into adulthood.
Hmm.
And as an adult human species, we make different choices than
Hmm.
we've made in the past.
Hmm. How do you think we create some peace? Because what's also really fascinating is within the US, there are there are people who are very, very proud, to be US citizens, and
Mm.
the Constitution and this and that. And then again, with this duality that's happening, there are people who have lived here for generations who are basically saying, we suck, right? And then we have people who have migrated here for the opportunities, right? And then we have the land on which many of us live on that was stolen from native. So it might be a bigger question than we can kind of get into today, but how do you think we go about healing all of that trauma that is in
Right,
this melting pot?
right. Well, I think if we could simplify that um, to just say that it's the difference between pride and arrogance. National pride is very positive. It's very important to have a, to have a sense of pride in who we are as a nation, and who we are as a culture, and who we are as a unified, in our unified destiny as a soul nation. And then arrogance is something completely different. Arrogance is, we are better than everybody else. We are more, important than anybody else. We are the world, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or, reacts. And I have the right to impose a certain um, idea on people around me. So that arrogance, it doesn't matter whether it's a nation, whether it's a political system, whether it's the way of thinking. We all have that arrogance, and we all need to be aware of that. Um, Anytime that I think I'm better than somebody else, or anytime I think I'm worse than somebody else, that's arrogance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
victimhood is always based on arrogance. There's always a perpetrator followed by a victim, followed by a perpetrator, followed by a victim. That whole cycle of arrogance needs to be released.
Yeah.
And moving into a sense of true pride is part of that. What are the gifts of what I've been given as a culture, as a nation, as an individual, as a family, um, as a as a species? What are these gifts um, that can reflect a deeper aspect of divinity?
Mm-hmm.
And you find that every single nation has its own destiny, and they interlock, intersect. It's not about opposing or confronting or competing,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes maturity
Yeah.
to get there.
Yeah.
And I think this whole process with Pluto, the death and rebirth and transformation, yes, it takes time. These things do take time.
Mm-hmm.
Maturity takes time, but
Mm-hmm.
it's happening. It
Mm-hmm.
is happening,
And Pluto is also the underworld, right?
right?
Yeah. So the things we just
Yeah,
can't see.
yeah. So until we see them, they're gonna, you know, bite us in the ass.
Absolutely.
So it's just, the nature of things. So it's better to stick our heads out from the sand and learn to see things as they are, and and take responsibility
Yeah.
for our part in it.
Yeah.
Responsibility means to be responsive rather than reactive, which
Right.
means making a choice, a true choice.
Right. Right. And that is what a lot of us need to do now, is feel the feelings that come up, and instead of just immediately respond, to feel it.
Mm, yeah. Or instead of reacting, to feel it, to make a choice. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So when you're reacting, it's an instinctive reaction based on um, immaturity. Whereas responsiveness comes from choice. It comes from self-awareness, from reflection, from integrity, from wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
from trust in the bigger picture, from the ability to see another as yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. This is so good. I'm being mindful of the time. Um, do you do you want to keep chatting a little bit, or do you want to do a meditation?
Oh,
What would feel
yeah,
good for you?
we could do a meditation.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, this would be good. Let's do a meditation since we talked about um, unity and separation. Um, in many of the shamanic traditions in North America and South America, they talk about the three worlds. So there's the upper world, the world of spirit, there's the lower world, which is the world of nature, and the middle world, which is the world that humans tend to be more comfortable in, which is the mind. Where you're seeing things in terms of distinct mental perspectives.
Mm,
Um, but the idea is to create a bridge between all three worlds. So, the personal self is what we normally call the human self, or the human identity. This is, to the shamans, only one of three worlds. And when we create doorways between these three worlds, then we can become multidimensional. We can step out of this idea of separation. And immediately, as soon as you do that, you experience a sense of expansion and peace and openness and joy, because that's the nature of who we are.
mm,
Nature is not to be separate and fearful. It's when we get stuck in the middle world that we experience those things.
mm,
So this meditation comes from the Inca tradition in South America. I spent some time traveling there and learning from the Inca um, people. And the Inca tradition originally comes from before the invasion of the Spanish conquistadors. So before they got caught up in the idea of um, right and wrong, good and evil, positive and negative, it was simply seeing that everything is a flow. And our choice, the only choice we have, is either we go with the flow or we resist the flow. And when we go with the flow, that opens up doorways between the worlds. When we resist the flow, we get stuck in the middle world, in the forced crucible of the mind. So maybe if you like, I could guide us through a quick
yeah.
little meditation that helps to open up those doorways.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. All right, so wherever you are, whoever's listening, imagine now that there's a bubble of light that completely surrounds your physical body. It's like an egg-shaped bubble, maybe 6 feet around in every direction. And this bubble represents the boundaries of the middle world. It's the personal self. So it's your thoughts, your feelings, your sense of personal identity, the memories that you've carried in a particular incarnation. And what we're going to do now is open up doorways to the upper world and simultaneously to the lower world. So imagine now that directly over the top of this bubble, So about 6 feet over the top of your head, there's a window. And it's a circular window like the diaphragm of a camera. And you open this window now as wide as you can, just with your intention. So it doesn't take visualization or effort of any kind. You're just making that intention, and the window opens. And as soon as you open that window, there's this tremendous force of light that starts pouring in from the upper world. So imagine that you're standing under this amazingly strong, beautiful waterfall, and you have this powerful stream of light pouring in through that window, down through the bubble, down through your physical body, and into the earth. And this force of light is electrical in nature. It's very high frequency, it's very cleansing, very purifying. And as it moves through the emotional, mental, and physical bodies, it begins to clear out any resistance or fear, any attachment, any dis-ease that's been held within our lower bodies. And it just naturally clears it, releases it down into the earth. And Mother Earth receives this stuck energy or heavy energy as compost, something she welcomes and transmutes immediately. So all you're doing now is keeping that window open, allowing this stream of light to continue pouring in from above, like this beautiful electrical force of light. It just happens spontaneously because it's simply the nature of living energy. And the Incas say also that whenever energy moves in one direction, there's always a reciprocity, a response in the other direction. So as this electrical force of light continues to move downwards from the sky down to the earth, there's a response, a natural, spontaneous response from the earth. And you become aware of this magnetic force of light that comes up from deep within the earth, comes up through the soles of your feet, moves up through your body, moves up through your bubble, and then up through the same window to the sky. And notice the difference between the electrical and the magnetic flows. The magnetic energy flowing upwards is very healing, very nurturing, very loving. It's slower, it's heavier. is very, very grounded. And as this magnetic force moves up through your body, it creates space where more of who you are can land, where the soul can enter and expand. And as these two flows, the electrical and the magnetic frequencies of light, continue to move downwards and upwards, there's an interaction between them. And you begin to experience an expansion, where your bubble itself begins to open and expand further and further and further out. And so what's happening is that you're now beginning to connect with a very subtle body, sometimes known as the causal body or the soul body. You feel yourself expanding further and further out into space, across the earth, across the skies, as far out as you wish to go. Entering into a state of great peacefulness, spaciousness, openness, and oneness. You begin to experience yourself as the soul, as the self, the one spirit that moves through all things. And so you're stepping into this multidimensional presence. You're connecting with the truth of who you are. The doorways between the worlds are wide open. And notice that you're simultaneously opening the door to the upper world and to the lower world, to the world of spirit and the world of nature. The electrical and the magnetic, the yin and the yang. But as we connect with the three worlds simultaneously, we are no longer in duality. We are no longer in separation or division or fear. Simply a state of flow where all things are connected, where all things find a balance and harmony. So keep that window open, allow it to become wider and wider, and simply rest. in that flow of life energy, electrical energies moving downwards, magnetic energies moving upwards, harmonizing together to link up with the soul body, feeling that subtle multidimensional presence, knowing that you can access this aspect of you anytime you wish, for this is who you are. Notice your vibrational frequency at this point. And as your vibrational frequency raises, you notice that there's no room for despair, for fear, for hopelessness, for separation, for division. You begin to develop a new relationship with yourself, with the divine within yourself, as yourself, and also with Gaia, with the earth, with nature, with the elemental world all around you. When indigenous people around the world talk about walking in balance upon this earth, this is what they're referring to. And this is what we can all remember once again. So this is a practice you can do anytime you wish. Anytime you feel disconnected, lost, fearful, anytime you're looking for a deeper connection with who you are and with the spirit of life. So thank you for joining me in this space.
That was beautiful.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Nicole.
Thank you so much for being here today, for chatting with me. I'd love to do it again if you have the time or if you desire.
Good.
That'd be great.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you for making this happen. I think it's such an important time
Yeah,
for all of us, and to have the perspective and the tools to grow, to become what we're meant to be.
yeah.
It's so important.
I appreciate this conversation so much, just to be
Mm.
able to talk in this way. And I don't, for me, there's just a lightness where we can, I keep coming back to the word, but where we can come out of the duality and into what we really are, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
And I'm sure I'm just basking in the bliss of this meditation, but it's love, right? It's love, it's oneness, and it's how we can come together and help out our fellow brother and sister and
Mm.
dog
Absolutely. Yeah.
and cat.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Well, dogs and cats live in that awareness all the time.
they do. Mine are I mean, I have one of each, and they
Mm.
have been my saving love. They are love. They are such pure love, and I can love on them, and they just soak it in. And it's
Mm.
been, I loved them before, but the love I have for them now to spend this time with me and together is
Yeah.
out of this world. Yeah. Mm, mm.
Sure. They're such teachers for us, aren't they?
They are. Oh, they are. My dog, she just wakes
Mm.
up happy, and I love it. And so I wake up happy with her, no matter what's going on. They're so present.
Mm.
They're just here. What's now? Do we go outside? Do we eat? Do we get belly rubs? What right now?
Yeah. And we can learn to be exactly that,
Yeah,
you know, just opening the doorways.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't want to, but I do have to go. Um, but I'll message you, and if you're up for it, I would love to do this again.
Sure.
And
Sure.
thank you for the beautiful meditation. Your voice is so grounding and so soothing, your presence. It's
Mm.
just beautiful. Mm.
Yeah, I've been doing a series of meditations on Facebook Live, and they're archived on my YouTube channel, Kiara Windrider. So if people want to go back and just listen and continue, that's one way to do that.
Yes. And I'll put all your information below, your website and a link to your Facebook
Okay,
page, and
great,
your
great,
YouTube page. I'll put all that below.
great. I also will say that we have a weekly podcast called The Age of Pandora, and
That's how I found
people are
you.
welcome to join. Yeah, it's on the Above Duality
Hmm.
YouTube channel, so people can look for us there.
I'll link that as well. I'll put that
Okay,
there. Mm.
great.
Thank you so much. I
Well,
appreciate
thank you,
you.
Nicole, for making
Yeah.
this happen.
Yes.
So I'm delighted to share this time with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mm,
See you again, my
great.
friend.
All right.
All right.
Blessings.
Bye.
Bye.